Today's lesson is called the Pantheon, where ancient Rome comes alive. Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff.
My name is Roger, and today we are traveling to Rome. We're going to be talking about this famous ancient structure called the Pantheon, and that's where ancient Rome comes alive. And yeah, if you go to this place, you can kind of get an idea of what life was like back in those ancient times.
Yeah, this is an ancient building that is still standing that was built by the ancient Romans. So seriously, you get to see a bit of ancient Rome as it was long ago. And this might not have been. A long, long time ago, the Roman Empire was destroyed or was brought to the brink of utter destruction. I believe that the Eastern Roman Empire did survive a little bit longer than the Western Roman Empire, but the city of Rome was sacked. It was invaded by barbarians who destroyed everything in sight. But get this, when they finally did get to Rome and they saw the Pantheon, they were so impressed by it that they said, hey, leave this alone. They destroyed everything else, the aqueducts, all that stuff, but they left the Pantheon alone. They said, we're not going to mess with this. This is a beautiful building. How amazing. What a cool story. Anyways, folks, let's go ahead and take a short break. But when we come back, we'll start reading from our article called The Pantheon, where ancient Rome comes alive.
The Pantheon, where ancient Rome comes alive. As anyone who is familiar with Rome will tell you, a lifetime isn't enough to see all of the city's ancient treasures. So what should you do if you have only a few days to spend there? It's simple. Make an itinerary and make sure it includes the Pantheon. Built nearly 2,000 years ago, the Pantheon is one of Rome's most well-preserved pieces of architecture. It has a massive portico, huge granite columns, and a domed rotunda. The columns supporting the portico weigh 60 tons each and were dragged all the way from the mountains of Egypt and shipped via the Nile and the Mediterranean to Rome.
大家好，第一部分我们看到单字 itinerary， 这个字是名词，指旅行计划、预定行程。例如 Your travel agent should provide a full itinerary along with your tickets. 你的旅行社应该会连同你的票券提供完整的旅行计划给你。或是 A business trip itinerary may include more than one destination. 一趟出差的预定行程可能会包含不止一个目的地。接着我们看到形容词 massive， 指雄伟的、巨大的、大量的。例如 The castle's massive walls looked even more impressive up close. 那座城堡的巨墙近看更是折人。或是Melody had massive debts to pay off after college. Melody 读完大学后要付巨额债务。另外，除了上面的意思，这个字还可以指大规模的、非常严重的。举例来说 A massive earthquake destroyed most of the town. 一场大规模地震毁了那个城镇一大半。或是 The dam's failure resulted in massive floods downstream. 那座水坝溃坝造成下游严重淹水。再来我们看到单字 via， 这个字也可以念 via， 这个字是介系词，指透过、凭借、经由。像是 If you're coming to my apartment via bus, just get off at the Main Street bus stop. 如果你要搭巴士到我家，只要在缅因街那站下车就可以了。或是 We flew to Paris and transferred via Istanbul. 我们经伊斯坦堡转机至巴黎。另外，补充一个相关片语By means of something. Means, M-E-A-N-S. By means of something. 表示透过点点点。我们可以说 Edith learned how to paint by means of watching videos online. Edith 透过看网络影片学画画。
Okay, so let's dig into our article for today. It's all about the Pantheon, and this is a place where ancient Rome comes alive. And maybe you've already been to the Colosseum, and yes, it's a great place, and maybe you'd like to see it again someday, but hey, you want to try something else that's similar, some other ancient structure that is still standing. Well, the Pantheon is the place for you. And here it begins by saying, as anyone who is familiar with Rome will tell you, a lifetime isn't enough to see all of the city's ancient treasures. Yeah, so anybody who's familiar with Rome will tell you this. Hey, you won't live long enough to explore all of the ancient treasures in the city of Rome. There are just too many of these places to go to. Even local Romans probably haven't seen them all. So indeed, there are lots and lots of things to check out in the city of Rome.
There you go. So what should you do if you only have a few days to spend there in Rome? You can't see everything. It's impossible. So what can you do? Well, it's simple. Make an itinerary and make sure it includes the Pantheon. Sure, the Colosseum's nice, but it's really more of a ruin, a nice-looking ruin than anything else. So at the top of your itinerary, you've got to see the Pantheon, and then you've also got to see the fountains there. Rome is the city of fountains, so also see as many fountains as you can. By the way, an itinerary is a to-do list for the most part. Your travel itinerary, by the way, might be a little bit more complicated than just a simple to-do list. A travel itinerary will tell you where you need to be, what flights you're taking, when they take off, when they arrive, so on and so forth.
Right, so for example, when I fly home, I get a pretty complicated itinerary because I'm from a very remote place in Iowa. So of course, the itinerary will say, yes, your flight from Taipei is to San Francisco. Then you're going to get on a flight from San Francisco to Denver. Then you're going to get on a flight from Denver to Des Moines. And then you're going to get on a bus from Des Moines to Esterville. And then you're going to get a rickshaw from there to your uncle's house in the country where you'll sleep outside under the stars and stuff like that. But in any case, this is your itinerary in Rome here. Yes, you might go see the Vatican, and you'll go see the Colosseum, and you'll have some Italian food, and maybe go to a big market or something. And then, of course, you'll go see the Pantheon. These are all things that make up your itinerary.
Anyways, built nearly 2,000 years ago, the Pantheon is one of Rome's most well-preserved pieces of architecture. Okay, so the Colosseum is nice. Is it super well-preserved? Not really. But the Pantheon is unbelievably well-preserved, okay? Does it look 2,000 years old? No, it looks pretty new. I mean, it is 2,000 years old, but considering that it is that old, it still looks great. It has aged remarkably well. Anyways, it says here that it is a piece of architecture. Here, notice we're saying that this building is a piece of architecture and that it is not an architecture.
Right, that's a translation problem. Of course, architecture is usually translated into Chinese as jianzhu, which for you guys does refer to not only the art of building buildings, but also the building itself. Not so in English. Architecture is the science itself and not the building. You could say that you like the architecture of that building, but don't call the building an architecture. That is wrong. So yes, indeed, it's a piece of architecture, and it's well preserved. So if you like that kind of architecture or that kind of building style, hey, this building will not disappoint you. And it goes on to say it has a massive portico, huge granite columns, and a domed rotunda. So these are some of the features of the Pantheon.
All right, now what does the word massive mean? It means huge, gigantic, really, really big. Okay, so if you go to the Pantheon, you are going to be blown away by what you see. Okay, this portico is huge, gigantic, massive. You get the idea. Further, they've got some granite columns here, some huge granite columns. By the way, granite is a heavy, hard, strong type of rock. It's not super uncommon, but it is quite strong, quite heavy, and it can be hard to work with. One thing that is interesting about granite, though, is if you do polish it, it shines. It has quartz in it that kind of almost looks diamond-like, so it has a sparkle to it. It can be pretty when you polish it. Further, it says here that the rotunda is domed. That means there is a dome on top of it. Whenever I think of a dome, I think of the U.S. Capitol building, where the House of Representatives meet and the Senate meet. On top of that building, there is a big dome, or you could say that the U.S. Capitol building is domed.
Or another example would be the National Taiwan Museum in downtown Taipei. That is a domed museum. Please note here that the word dome is being used as a verb here. It is domed, which means it is a building with a dome or a half sphere on top of it. And also, if you have a domed building, you're probably going to have a rotunda, which is kind of a round room inside a building, like the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol.
There you go. Now, the columns supporting the portico weigh 60 tons each. That's heavy. And were dragged all the way from the mountains of Egypt and shipped via the Nile and the Mediterranean to Rome. So they wanted this special granite. Okay, so they went all the way to Egypt to get it, and then they had it shipped back to Rome. First, they used the Nile River, and then they used the Mediterranean because they wanted to get it all the way from Egypt back to Rome, okay? Now, they did this via the Nile and the Mediterranean, i.e., this was how they did it. This is the route that they took when they were shipping these columns.
Gee, I wonder how they did that. I don't think the Suez Canal existed at that time. There must have been a way to get that granite from Egypt to Rome back in those days. Remember, granite, of course, as you said, is a very heavy rock, and I believe it's huagangshi in Chinese, in case you didn't know. Okay, that brings us to the end of the first part of our lesson. Let's now move on to the second part.
The rotunda's interior gives off a sense of balance and harmony, being perfectly symmetrical at 43.2 meters in height and diameter. The dome above remains to this day the world's largest unreinforced concrete dome, thanks to a very clever technique. Thick, heavy stone was used for the dome's base, while progressively lighter stone mixed in concrete formed the structure as it went up, thus decreasing the dome's weight and thickness.
第二部分，我们看到形容词 symmetrical 指对称的。举例来说 ，Alice liked the lamp's symmetrical design. Alice 喜欢这座灯对称的设计。再来，我们看到副词 progressively 指逐渐的、日益增加的。举例来说 ，As I got older, my eyesight got progressively worse and worse. 随着我年纪的增长，我的视力越来越差。
Okay, we are inside the Pantheon, okay? The rotunda's interior gives off a sense of balance and harmony, being perfectly symmetrical at 43.2 meters in height and diameter. So immediately I'm thinking of this as being a circular building because it says here it has a diameter, okay? When I think of a diameter of a circle, I'm thinking of the distance across that particular circle, the longest distance across that circle. And remember that line across, it has to go through the center of that circle. Apparently, it says here that it's symmetrical, just like a circle is. If you were to fold a piece of paper that's in the form of a circle, however you fold it along that diameter, it's always going to be perfect, okay? It's going to overlap perfectly because it has symmetry, okay? Anyways, again, I said we are on the inside of the Pantheon. We are on the interior of that particular building. That's what we mean here when we use the word interior. If you are on the inside of something, you are on the interior of that thing, okay? On the exterior would mean on the outside. Interior means on the inside.
Right, and it has perfect symmetry because of those symmetrical dimensions, including the diameter there, and the dome above remains to this day the world's largest unreinforced concrete dome, thanks to a very clever technique, which we'll get to in a second. But again, this is a special dome because it's made of unreinforced concrete. Most concrete structures are reinforced with rebars, but this one doesn't have those rebars. It's just concrete only, so it's unreinforced. It doesn't have something to help it stand up.
These days, you can only build skyscrapers because you have reinforced concrete. You use concrete, but inside you've got big metal rods to make that concrete stronger. That's reinforced concrete. 2,000 years ago, they didn't have methods like that. They didn't have iron and metal and stuff like that that you could use inside of concrete. In fact, they probably didn't even have the same type of concrete we have now. So they could only use unreinforced concrete. And I have heard somewhere that Roman concrete could have actually been superior to our concrete in some ways, but that's a different lesson for a different time. Anyways, how did this work? It worked thanks to a very clever technique. Thick, heavy stone was used for the dome's base, while progressively lighter stone mixed in concrete formed the structure as it went up, thus decreasing the dome's weight and thickness. So, basically, the structure tapered as we went upward. Things got lighter and lighter, or the structure was lighter and lighter as it went up towards the sky. There was less weight as you went up.
Okay, so indeed, this decreased the dome's weight and thickness, and of course, the dome can stand as it looks today. What a marvelous work of architecture. Okay, let's move on now to the third and final portion of our lesson. Let's listen first.
A circular opening called an oculus was created at the dome's center to further prevent the dome from caving in. The Pantheon's only source of natural light, it creates the effect of a sundial when the sun shines through it.
最后第三部分，我们看到片语 cave in 表示坍塌、塌陷。举例来说 ，The old house caved in after the storm。那间老房子在暴风雨过后倒塌了。另外，这个片语也有屈服、让步的意思。我们可以说 After months of listening to her son beg, the mother caved in and bought the boy a new bicycle. 听了儿子哀求数月后，那位母亲终于让步，买了新脚踏车给他。或是 These protesters refused to cave into the threats from the police. 这群抗议人士拒绝屈服于警方的威胁。
Okay, so let's go ahead and wrap up today's article on the Pantheon. Next, we learn a circular opening called an oculus was created at the dome's center to further prevent the dome from caving in. So there you go. We know that as you go further and further up in this structure, it gets progressively lighter. At the very top, it's super light. In fact, there's no weight at all. There's actually a hole there called an oculus, and this keeps the structure from caving in. That dome isn't going to fall in or collapse in on itself thanks to this oculus.
Oculus just means eye in Latin. It's an opening there. And, of course, to cave in means to collapse, especially if you're digging underground. Hey, you don't want the cave to collapse or cave in. You might be buried alive there. So, yes, this prevents the dome from falling down, from caving in. And the next sentence says, the Pantheon's only source of natural light, it creates the effect of a sundial when the sun shines through it. So here, this pattern here is the Pantheon's only source of natural light. That is, of course, referring to the oculus. So that's what it here refers back to. Basically, it's saying that the oculus is the only source of natural light. Therefore, it creates the effect of a sundial when the sun shines through it. So a sundial, of course, is an ancient clock that used the sun's shadow to tell us what time it was.
There you have it. All right, folks, with that, it's time for us to stop for now, but don't worry, the Chinese teacher is waiting in the wings.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第二部分的第一句写到，万神殿的圆形大厅内部散发出一种平衡与协调感，以 43.2 公尺的高度和直径完美对称。好，文中它是用到片语动词 give off 来表达发出、散发出，后面常常会接气味啊、烟啊或是光线等等。那么至于 a sense of balance and harmony 表示平衡与协调感，当我们用 a sense of 加上名词就表示什么什么感，像 a sense of direction 方向感， a sense of humor 幽默感， a sense of loss 失落感， a sense of fulfillment 表示成就感等等。举例来说， She has a terrible sense of direction 就是说她的方向感极差，非常差。好，那么另外课文里面它用到 diameter 这个字来表达直径，我们来学它的字首字根。先来看 dia 这个字首呢，它表示穿越、跨越，它可以指说从这一端到那一端的两端之间，所以 dia 这部分有在什么之间的意思。好，那它其实也可以指说涵盖从这一端到另一端的范围，所以 dia 这部分它也可以表达完全彻底的意思。所以我们刚刚讲了两个意思哦，一个是在什么之间，另外一个是完全或是彻底。好，那来看到在 diameter 这个字当中呢，它的字首 dia 表示跨越，那么 meter 这个部分它除了公尺还有计量、测量的意思。好，那么 diameter 这个字我们就说刚刚说是表示直径嘛，我们就可以想象它是从这一端到另一端的这种测量距离，在这两端之间的测量距离。好，那我们顺便来补充几个相同字首的单字。第一个是 diagonal diagonal， 它的字首 dia 表示穿越，那么 gon 表示角度， al 是形容词字尾。那我们可以试着联想，从某个角度穿越到另外一个角度，那就是对角线咯。我们把这个角对折到另外一个角，这个角度穿越过去，所以这样去联想说 diagonal 它是可以当形容词来形容是对角线的或是斜纹的，它也可以当名词来表达对角线、斜线的意思。第二个补充的是dialect dialect， 好，它的字首 dia 表示跨越或是在什么之间，那么字根 lect 表示交谈，合在一起 dialect 就是指方言。那同学们可以试着联想，我们彼此之间可以互相交谈、可以互相沟通的语言，那么最早其实就是用当地的方言嘛。那么第三个补充的是 diagnosis diagnosis， 它的字首 dia 表示完全，那么字根 gnosis 表示知悉、知识。同学们可以试着想，当你完全知道病情，就可以去诊断出这个病症了，所以 diagnosis 就表示诊断、诊断结果的意思咯。那第四个补充的是 diabetes diabetes，好，它的字首 dia 表示穿越，字根 betes 表示走，合在一起呢 diabetes 它的字面意思是 pass through。 好，其实在拉丁文和希腊文当中的 diabetes 它就表示排尿过多，这是糖尿病的症状之一。那我们也许就可以用这个 pass through 一直有尿液流过通过的那种方式去联想 diabetes 是糖尿病的意思。好，那么以上是今天重点整理，我们回顾今天的单字吧。
Architecture. Dihua Street in Taipei is famous for its historic architecture. Massive. The artist created a sculpture from a massive block of stone. Dome. Robert stared in amazement at the large domed ceiling. Via. Christopher and his wife flew to Japan via Hong Kong. Interior. The interior of the shop was damaged by the fire. Diameter. The diameter of the Earth is around 13,000 kilometers. Unreinforced. Unreinforced concrete is not flexible, so it can crack quite easily under stress. Progressively. Veronica's humming became progressively quieter as she walked away.
Well, everyone, today's article has come to an end, and I sure hope you guys enjoyed reading and learning along with us. I am Jeff.
I am Roger.
See you next time.